Hi, Tom.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Not too bad. I'm keeping working on this, see if I can't figure out. There we go.
Well, yeah, the county made me change everything from a meeting to a webinar, and so it's a lot more involved to get people set up to be able to do video feeds.
Yeah, that's all right. This is only my third one today.
Oh, you can take over then. You're a veteran now.
No. Just my third one, sitting in the confines of my easy chair.
Oh. Well,
Oh,
I need to.
Andrew.
Hi, Paul. I need to invest in an easy chair myself.
Now we see Tom.
not much to see.
Well, you're looking like a little Shaggy there. Maybe you ought to get a haircut.
Yeah. Look who's talking.
Yeah.
I like that beard style. I might have to try that.
Just let it grow.
Yeah.
It's kind of a Scottish look, I guess.
I dig it, man. Looks great.
Oh, Ryan. Happened to see one of your trucks out and about
Oh
yesterday.
yeah, they doing all right?
Yeah. Looked like it wasn't causing any traffic
Good.
backups.
That's what we asked for. All right, good.
Can you guys hear me?
Didn't see
Yes, we
you and
can.
forth any chicken
Yep.
bones or anything like that.
Good. We couldn't have that.
No. Then Tom would be mad. You know, our whole reason for existence is to make sure that Tom's happy.
I'm glad somebody figured that out.
There's someone in one of my classes that actually works for you, Ryan. I can't remember her name though.
Oh, McKenna Conway.
Oh
Is it
yeah,
the-
because she has a similar or the same last name, but not
Yes. Yes.
Would you be related as in spousal?
No, unrelated, oddly enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And then also, Andrew, another person in your class, Isabella Crane, is joining on. I think she's training for the first time tomorrow morning with me.
I don't think we met.
Okay, I think the same soil science class is what it is.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Nice.
See who it is.
It sounds like an awesome class, though.
Oh yeah, you should come and learn. Come and
Yeah,
join us.
amen. I saw the syllabus, and the book was expensive, but then they said that they don't do the book much, and it's just like papers and stuff. So that sounds doable.
Yeah, I'll share the slideshows with you if you like.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're getting pretty nerdy on the soil science recently, so that would be really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Evening, everyone. Sorry, I missed
Hello.
the onset of what sounded like a very enjoyable conversation.
Well, we figure we may as well say something while we're waiting for everybody to show up.
I think that's a good plan.
Hi, Randy.
It looks like
Randy. However it is you pronounce it.
I know, it's Norwegian, so it throws everyone for a loop. It's Rondi.
Hi, Lily.
Good evening.
Lily, did I kick you out of the meeting?
Well, it was being really funny, so I thought I joined it wrong, but I don't know. I'm back.
Well, the county's made us change all of these from meetings to webinars. So then I got to switch everybody once they get in to a panelist and then make you co-host to be able to share your video and
Yeah,
lots of
I'd never
clicks.
seen it, so I thought I must have logged in wrong, but it was That was it.
Same here.
All right, well, it looks like we have enough of us here to get this party started. So I'll call to order this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Monroe County Solid Waste Management District for this third Thursday of February the 17th, 2022. Rondi, will you please call roll? As soon as you're
Sure.
unmuted. Thank you.
John Arnold. Oh, actually, I recall he's not going to be here today. Sorry. Ryan Conway,
Present.
Rondi Cox, present. Lily Kleinlein,
That's you, Lily.
Andrew Manley,
Present.
Adelaide Petrov, you, Nelson Schaefer, Paul White,
Here.
Morning Wilder, and Joe Winia.
Here.
We have 6, which gives us quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. So then we will go on to our first order of business, which is adoption of the agenda, which I'm going to share with all panelists. Sorry, there are some new menus involved.
Tom, drinking
Bear
out
with
of
me
yellow
for just a
cups is
moment.
illegal.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
All right, it should probably be shared now. So is there, can I get confirmation? Actually, yeah, I think it's
Yep.
shared.
Confirmation.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So a little more shuffling of windows required. Apologies. I'm going to set the tone for the rest of the meeting.
Looks
All
like
right,
we have a new arrival.
Yeah,
Adelaide.
oh, do we? I can't see anything anymore. Welcome, Adelaide. All right, so approval of, the agenda, yes. This was distributed by email and uploaded to Dropbox on Monday, February 14th. Are there any objections to sharing the agenda as it is shared and was distributed? Seeing and hearing none, the agenda is adopted. And so we will go on to approval
Joe,
of the meeting minutes. Yes.
I just, no objections. I just, with the shared screen, Mr. Schaefer has since joined us. While the
Okay.
screen share was going on.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm here. And I agree with whatever you've done.
Excellent. It's
We've
good to
talked
know.
about your beard, and that's it.
Yeah, you're just jealous.
No, I'm not jealous.
All right.
It's a great,
So
it's a great food storage device. I can go a week.
We adopted the agenda so far.
Okay, thank
indeed,
you.
I'm going to go ahead and pick up where we left off, and that is approval of the meeting minutes. Those are also distributed with the agenda in the packet on Monday, February 14th. And these are the minutes for the January 20th regular meeting. Are there any corrections to those minutes? All right, seeing none, I will note 2 corrections that I had made. I also noted them in the file in Dropbox itself, but the first is that the chair report was not included in the report section. And the second is that elections were described as being conducted by a voice vote, but it was a roll call vote. So we will follow up on those with the secretary. And if there are no further corrections, those minutes are approved as corrected. And we will move on to reports, first from the district, if you would be so kind, Tom.
I will, and the first thing that I want to report actually is a CAC matter. And this does not have to be decided tonight, but have been advised that your September the 15th meeting is in all likelihood going to have to be relocated or rescheduled, assuming that we'll be doing in-person or hybrid meetings by that time. And the Nat U Hill room will not be available due to budget hearings on September the 15th. So just bring that to the CAC's attention. And if in the next month or two, you can make a determination on canceling, rescheduling, relocating that meeting so we can let the county know so they can correct their calendar and make sure we're set up for Zoom, hybrid, whatever it is we need to do for that meeting. And I don't know that I have a whole lot to update at this time. I will, just since this is a public meeting and a chance to get it out there publicly, we'll relay to the CAC that we have re-encountered an unpleasant issue today. Year or so ago, we were having an issue at our Ellettsville Recycling Center where somebody was depositing human waste in their orange bags. And the Republic driver discovered that again this morning. And that is a significant issue. It is a health hazard to the Republic Services employees. If it continues, it runs the risk of us having to suspend the orange bag program at the Ellettsville location. So we will continue to put that out there publicly as we did last time, and it seemed to work for a year or so. And we'll see where it goes this time, but hopefully we can get that get the person aware that that's not acceptable and get it stopped so we don't have any interruption in service at our Ellettsville facility. Let's see, still working on apartment recycling. Have reached out to a couple of property managers that might have space available in parking lots at their facilities that we could do a recycling drop off that would be conveniently located to a large number of apartment complexes. So it's all very preliminary, but need to identify locations and gauge interest of the parties that control those properties of allowing the district to do that. So we'll see what kind of response we get there. We have an open request for information regarding waste tire management in Monroe County in an effort to gauge the need for additional services and if the district should be providing those, and try to assure some compliance with the state statutes that govern solid waste districts providing such services. Those are due on March the 4th. I have not received any responses to this point, but do hope to have some responses and be able to present those to the board at their March meeting. Depending on what information we get in those responses will kind of dictate the path forward for the district regarding waste tires and whether or not we're going to start a program to accept those. Also have an open request for bid for an orange bag vendor. Those are also due on March the 4th. Those are to be delivered sealed. They'll be opened at a public meeting at noon on the 4th with the intent to be that staff would vet and review the bids received over that next week and present the bids received to the board with a recommendation for award of a contract on that. That's kind of the big things going on at the district. I'll remember this time and beat Joe to the punch on the website is up and running. And Joe can give a little bit more detail on it, but a neat feature that I think that Joe's idea to add in there when we launched that, there's a little feedback, an opportunity to provide feedback, a little window that pops up when you're visiting the site for the first time. And I know that we have gotten some feedback. Joe's indicated that that's been positive on the new website. So we're glad that we're getting the feedback. We're glad that people seem to be liking the new design of the website and that feel that it's easier to navigate and find the information that they're looking for. That's all that I have.
Thank you very much, Tom. Are there any questions on that report?
I have a question that's semi-related, and we can revisit this at a different time if it's not the appropriate time to talk about it. But just speaking of having the website and having that be an easy place to access information, I got a letter recently in the mail with the new schedule for trash pickup. And in that letter was a list of things that you can't recycle. It included food grade cardboard like pizza boxes or frozen meal boxes. And I was wondering what was meant by that. Like I know, pizza, if the cardboard box is greasy and stuff, then you can't recycle it. But, if I had literally that night, I was having like a frozen pizza from a box. And then I was like, oh, can I not recycle this? It wasn't touched by any grease or anything, but it's a frozen food container. And so I was wondering if I could either get clarification or if you think that's something that could be included on the website if it isn't already.
Well, what you got's from the city of Bloomington.
Okay,
And
yeah.
that is, a separate program from ours, and that's run by the city. The district, in most cases, will accept boxes that had frozen food in them. There are, there are some that are, packaged in a way that the food's not inside a bag or otherwise, prohibited from coming in contact with the cardboard. And there can be times where if things start to thaw out in the box, or depending on exactly what it is, you can still wind up with some food residue on the cardboard. And that would at some point in the recycling process get kicked out because of that contamination. But as far as a blanket prohibition on it, that's something you'd have to talk to the city about. But that does jog my memory to one other thing, that we were approached by city sanitation, and Elisa has started working with them on some I guess joint outreach efforts, finding areas where our services and our issues and our needs overlap, where we can, as a partner with the city sanitation department, put out, on social media or on PSAs on the radio, some outreach materials that would benefit both organizations, and help to make things more efficient, better, and try to reduce contamination and ensure that we're getting as much recycled as we can.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
It might actually be neat if, I don't know how much work would be involved for this, but if there was some sort of grid that said, like things that you might want to recycle and, as rows, and then for the columns, it would be like the district and the city. So you could see, even though I can't recycle with the city, this particular item with the city, I could recycle it with the district, or although it could be very cumbersome, especially if you get down to very, listing every specific item. But I've always thought that would be really neat, because then people would know I can or I can't recycle this, and here's where I can put it.
Well, yeah, but there's not going to be a whole lot of things that we can recycle that the city doesn't, or vice versa. The frozen food box, I was not aware that the city did not recycle those. And I know, Joe, when we were doing the website, that was one of the questions that came up when we were doing accepted and unaccepted item list, was boxes that contain frozen food. So that's really, I think, the first material or item I'm aware of that the city doesn't want, that we would accept.
It does seem like, aren't those frozen food boxes often coated in a thin layer of plastic?
Some are. The pizza boxes aren't.
Okay, I haven't bought frozen pizza in years. So I don't know.
And it could be a situation where, and I can't speak for the city, but because there's enough of those that have a coating in them, that don't have an inner packaging keeping the food from coming in contact with the cardboard, that they found it easier just to do the blanket prohibition and to try to piecemeal exactly what can and can't be accepted. And unfortunately use some material that way, but in the bigger picture, that's a policy that would do more to reduce contamination, rather than getting involved in having confused customers. And, when in doubt, it's free to recycle, or, cheaper to recycle, and that's how they make their decision, not based on, what's actually the proper step to take.
I'll chime in and say that when I visited a recycling location where all of Bloomington's recyclables go, I was personally told by the manager that they don't really care that much about grease on pizza boxes. They care more about volume rather than quality. So that's just my observation on that.
Well, and that's, and for them and, for Republic, Rumpke, whoever that collector is, volume is their concern. Now when it gets to the actual processor that's going to take that and try to recycle it into something else, that grease becomes an issue.
Agreed. Very important points, Paul. I do want to quick interject a moment and ask that, Paul, if you wouldn't mind putting your device on mute at the moment. There's a lot of audio feedback that's been coming through over the conversation. That would help reduce that.
Sure, I have no idea what it is. I shut everything off.
Thank you. And I do want to note as well on that topic of sorting. That was a conversation that I had. Well, actually, sorry, I'm out of order here. Are there any other questions on Tom's report or on the district's report? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for that report, Tom. And we'll go on to the chair report. And the only thing that I did have to mention is about the website. So I will pick that note up here and just note that one of the interests of the website was trying to include a lot more detail on what can and cannot be recycled. And to that point, as the remark that Tom had made is that there are a lot of multi-material types and different combinations of materials. So, and also different preferences from the recycling services and preferences that change over time. So while it would be great to be able to have for every single item that exists, yes, this is, or no, this is not recyclable, but the reality is it would both be impossible to make comprehensive and just kind of has to be summarized to what is practical, exactly as Tom had mentioned, for trying to reduce contamination while maximizing input. So it's kind of a difficult and unfortunate balance that needs to be struck, but something that will probably be further refined a little bit more on the website. And hopefully, so the website's been live for about 2 weeks. And if you haven't had the chance to check it out yet, there is a page that's designated to an in detail listing of everything that is and is not recyclable to the extent to which we are able to clearly define it. So hopefully that will answer some questions or maybe give some good ideas to what else could be done. There, as Tom mentioned, is a feedback section on the page and also contact information for the district so that if you do have any thoughts on how it could be improved, it would be good to know. So it was a lengthy and very particular way to report from the chair, but are there any other questions on that? All right. Then with that, we will conclude reports and we will go ahead and move on to the next items of business without reports from special committees, any special orders, or any unfinished business. We will get right into new business. And the first item to discuss there is the secretary position eligibility. So following our January annual meeting, when we elected officers, I had the realization that when I nominated John as secretary, he had already exceeded the more than 3 consecutive terms of service limit that was included in the bylaws, the newly adopted bylaws for term limits for officers. So with consultation from our legal counsel, there is, in a technical sense, no obligation to consider the previously served terms as retroactively applicable to the adoption of the bylaws. But I would say that per the intent of the bylaws, the more than 3 consecutive terms had already been served when the bylaws were adopted and when the election was held. So I think that's something that we could discuss in terms of dealing with our potentially ineligibly elected officer and how to proceed with having that office position filled for the rest of this year. I do have some thoughts, but I would like to hear from members on that subject if there are, first of all, if the situation is clear, and if so, how we feel to proceed.
What was it that you said that the legal department's feedback was?
That we aren't in, we are still in compliance with the bylaws in that it wasn't 3 years since the bylaws were adopted. So we could be considered legally compliant by having John as secretary, even though he had already served more than 3 consecutive terms at the time that he was elected. Ryan?
So it's more of a spirit of the law versus the letter of the law kind of a debate here then, yes?
I would say so, or perhaps the only reason that it is a debate is that the legal advice is that it doesn't need to be changed. But I think that, yeah, in my interpretation of it, if it were just up to me to decide if we were complying or not, I would say that we are incompliant in that the terms had already been served at the time that the bylaws were adopted and the election was made after the bylaws were adopted. So that is my interpretation of it, and therefore I think it would be most appropriate to elect a new officer for this year so that we can be in respect of the intention as well as the definition of the 3-term limit. Since we had explicitly had a conversation about it at the time that we were adopting the bylaws and decided to uphold that particular item. Yeah,
I forgot how we do, didn't we discuss doing co-secretaries or like 2 or 3 people that could rotate? Because that might also then impact our ability to fully be in compliance, or do we need to make an amendment?
So the co-secretary possibility doesn't, let's see, it doesn't exclude, or it still counts a member as serving as that position in office. So theoretically, if we had multiple co-secretaries for consecutive terms, they would all become ineligible if they all hit 3 terms. So what would be unwise is to have a large number of secretaries all serving continuously, and then suddenly none of them are eligible. So yes, that did occur to me only after adopting the bylaws that is possible. So having an entire committee of secretaries is maybe not a good idea, but I know that in terms of the language of the bylaws, John's service as secretary, even as co-secretary last year, still counts as holding that office. So he was co-secretary with Andrew last year and was solo secretary for 2 years, more than 2 years preceding that.
Now, if I remember,
You could have a secretary and then a vice secretary. It's all in the wording.
Potentially. Andrew, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that if I remember correctly, no one really wanted this position at the last meeting. Wasn't there a mechanism where if no one were to volunteer, then that officer would keep the same position until a need for election was made?
Again, I think that perhaps it could be legally interpreted that way. Well, I think that was, again, not with the intent of the bylaws, but I think if you were to read through the bylaws as they are worded, it is required that an officer be elected at the annual meeting. So I have under Article 4, Section A, members of the committee shall elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary from their membership. And then there's also under Article 4, Section 2, which defines elections. And I can, let's see, I can screen share it if you would like to look at it as well. So what I'm referencing here is at the top of the page, elections time. At the initial meeting of each year, membership shall elect the required officers from their membership. And then under eligibility, section 3, it says must be within officer term limits as defined in Article 4.4b, which if we go down a little bit further, says that an office may only be held at this by the same member for 3 consecutive terms. Now, the carryover clause that you mentioned was that I have to find the section, but the intent was that if the meeting is not held or the position cannot be filled for any reason, that it wouldn't just result in no one holding the position.
It's on the page down,
Was it?
page
Sorry.
5, I think 4. Yeah, in the event 4A2.
Yes, exactly. So in the event that elections do not take place within 1 year, officers shall continue to serve until the election of their successor. So
I would
don't-
add that Joe mentioned that John has served that role for 6 terms. And before that, I served it, I can't remember, but probably at least 3 up to 5. And so I talked with Joe about being willing to take it on if we needed a new secretary, because we knew that nobody was like, me at that last meeting, with hopes that in this year, some new people would decide, not necessarily new to the CAC, but someone new to the office would find that it is something they'd be willing to do. I mean, it is some work, but it's not a huge burden. You just have to have regular attendance. So with that said, if we were to move forward and the fear was, well, nobody agreed last month, I would be willing. I mean, if someone else wanted to, that would be awesome too. But I think our hope is that it doesn't just go back and forth between people that don't really want to keep hanging on to the role, but that it's something that does get passed along. And certainly the new bylaws will help with that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lily. So the hope is that, yeah, if we do opt to elect a new officer, that we can refine the work required by the secretary a little bit, make it more accessible, and then not have it be a hot potato that gets passed back and forth between the couple of people who are willing to endure doing the work. So anyone will be able to accept doing it and having it be a manageable activity. So that said, is there, let's see how to proceed. I think I would move that we elect a new secretary to ensure compliance with both the intent and the definition of the bylaws. Article 4, Section 4B, limit of terms. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion?
Do we need to remove John first? Have a vote to remove him?
That is an excellent question and would be great to have a parliamentarian to answer, but we do not have one. So
I would,
Tom.
to that, I guess I would add that if the stance of the CAC is that Mr. Arnold was elected in error due to his eligibility not being known at the time of the election, then you probably don't need to remove him if that's the stance of the CAC, that the election was in error.
I will also note that the vote would just be, or this motion would just be to elect a new officer and wouldn't actually be the election. So if we vote no, then nothing would change. And if we vote yes, then we can make a motion that could even include that language too, just to have clarity. Is there any additional discussion? All right, with that, if the vice chair would please make a roll call vote.
Okay, Ryan Conway,
Yes.
okay. Rodney Cox, yes. Lily Kleinline,
Yes.
Andrew Manley,
Yes.
Paul White,
No.
Joe Winnia,
Yes.
Adelaide Petrovio,
Yes.
Nelson Schaefer,
Yes. I forgot to unmute.
that's everyone present. And let's see, the votes were 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 yes, 1 no.
All right, with that, the motion carries and we will elect a new secretary. For the election process, I think I will nominate Lily Kleinline.
I'm not opposed to that, but I was wondering, since Lily had said if anyone else is interested in doing it, should we ask first if there's anyone who's actively interested? Is anyone actively interested, or would they have already have spoken up if they were, maybe? I don't know.
Sure. No, yeah, nominations can be made at any time. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Are there any other nominations or volunteers to nominate oneself?
I will say it's not as bad as we're kind of making it out to be. I just think I wish John were here to speak for himself, because I know he has enjoyed doing it as well. It just is something that's nice to get a little break from. So, and Andrew has done it as well. So I believe all of us who have been secretary could say it is a great little entry post to leadership in a commission or a board. But I would be willing to accept if needed.
If it helps anybody make a decision, I think with the Zoom recordings that I can share with whoever is elected secretary, a link to this cloud Zoom recording that will have a transcription with it. Talk to text, so it's not perfect, but it sometimes when we do our board minutes and stuff, it's a lot of times makes it a little easier to get through them.
This is still posted on CATS, right? That isn't changing with the switch to the webinar. Okay.
Right. But when we do the meetings with Zoom,
Sure.
Zoom records it in the cloud.
Mhm.
And I think I have them set up that it does an automatic transcription of the meeting.
Sure.
All right, without any further nominations, I will take a quick look at the election process. We have acceptance. All right, since we have only one nominee, it looks like we are, well, are there any? No, yeah, I think we'd be ready for a roll call vote on the nomination. Rhonda, if you would be so kind.
Did we already have a second, or do we need a second?
Second.
Question. I think, yeah, let's make sure it's a motion.
Sure.
Tom, were you about to make a remark?
Yeah, no, I believe that, I mean, the way that the bylaws are written, it's, you just need the nomination, and the nomination has to be accepted.
Right.
You know, you've already made the motion to elect a new secretary, so now it's just a matter of the nominations and who accepts their nomination.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Ryan Conway,
Yes.
Rodney Cox, yes. Lily Kleinline,
Sure, yes.
Andrew Manley,
Yes.
Paul White,
Absolutely.
Joe Winnia,
Yes.
Adelaide Petrovio,
Yes.
Nelson Schaefer.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Excellent.
Joseph,
passes.
are you getting any noise from mine now?
It still is occasional. It hasn't been as frequent as before, but it
Right.
is.
I just moved to a different room, so, okay.
All right, thank you. And a tremendous thank you to Lily as well for accepting that position. And we all are very, very grateful. I think that John will be as well. All right, so thank you all very much for your assistance with that. That is our first item of business. The second is on presentation for Robert's Rules of Order, which will probably take me a moment to get set up because of the the Zoom setup. It might be a little bit challenging, so bear with me for a moment. Once it is set up, I think it will be exciting.
Adelaide, while he's setting that up, I'm unfamiliar with that emoji.
I'm not as young as I once was, so the kids may be using it in a different way these days. But to me, that's like, yay, with like raise the roof type hands. It's celebratory.
All right, I think I
And it,
have done
Rondi,
what
did
is
you
required.
do you have your hand up, Rondi?
That was a mistake, sorry.
Okay. Oh, we can do.
She was also celebrating.
Thank you for catching that, Tom. I am blind to what's going on with everyone else. And actually, that said, if anyone has any questions or thoughts, by all means, just say something, because I have a lot of things on my screen and I'm not going to be able to manage it very effectively. So please chime in. Is the screen displaying a Robert's Rules title slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to try to keep this to about probably 10 minutes or so of presentation content, and then hopefully around 5 minutes or so, or a little more, of exercises to practice what we just talked about. So like I said, stop me if at any point you have questions or want to focus on something. But with that, I will go ahead and start with the layout. So there's basically 5 sections. We're going to first cover the fundamentals of what they are, kind of what parliamentary procedure is in general. Talk about how Robert's Rules is used and how we would like to use it for our purposes. We'll go through what the essential parts of, like, nuts and bolts using Robert's Rules is, and that's probably going to be the most important part, because no matter how we adopt it, we're going to need to be familiar with those things, and that's probably where I think most people have the biggest gaps. Even if you don't know about the history of Robert's Rules, it doesn't matter much, but being able to use the essential elements, I think, is going to be pretty important. And then, like I said, we'll do exercises to work through them. And then lastly, there's just a little bit more follow-up information that you'll be able to take a look at to learn more and to dig deeper if you have any questions or want to see more information. So the what is Robert's Rules, or what are Robert's Rules? They are intended for parliamentary procedure, which, as defined by Encyclopedia Britannica, is the generally accepted rules, precedents, and practices commonly employed in the governance of deliberative assemblies. So it's a lot of words for basically guiding what we do in a meeting in a structured way. So the purpose, according to Robert's Rules itself, as defined in their preface, is the object of Robert's Rules of Order is to assist an assembly to accomplish in the best possible manner the work for which it was designed. And they set out to do that with 3 fundamental principles, which are keeping the business organized by taking things up one at a time, and that's where the motion comes in. The second is by maintaining a fair and courteous environment. and that's part of the facilitation and the protocol with who speaks when and how to respect everyone. And then the last is to ensure the minority is heard and that the majority rules. So even if your opinion is against the groups, you still have the right to express it and for it to be heard by everyone. And what I thought was a historical fun fact was that Robert is actually Henry Martin Robert, and he was an engineering officer in the US Army. And as described in the intro to the Robert's Rules text, it says, without warning, he was asked to preside over a public meeting being held in a church in his community and realized that he did not know how. After the meeting, he vowed to learn something about parliamentary law. And again, as was the impetus for doing this, it went on to say that it was a humiliating experience that pretty much drove him to learn about parliamentary procedure to avoid repeating it. And that the more he learned and experienced, the more he realized the need for better management, better organization to manage the chaos. And that led to his first edition of the Pocket Manual in 1876. So definitely not new, and has, I think, been proven by the test of time that it's pretty effective and it's been widely adopted. So that's a little bit on what they are, a little bit on their history. And then what I want to underscore from this slide is that italicized part under the purpose is that it's to assist the assembly in accomplishing the best possible manner the work for which it was designed. And I say that because there are different ways in which they can be applied. There's a formal way where it's absolute everything all the time. And then there's an informal way. And again, this goes to the point that it's in the best possible manner. So it's reasonable for us to consider to what extent we want to adopt it, because I honestly think it's unreasonable for us to adopt it in the full formal way, given the size that we are and the work that we do. So that's why I wanted to take a moment to focus on the two different ways in which they can be applied. So the first is formal, and this is what you'll see in municipal meetings, for instance, like a City of Bloomington Common Council, any state government type work, where members always request the floor. They must always address the chair and cannot speak directly to other members. And then the chair always facilitates who speaks. And it's generally by doing rounds of comments where everybody gets one opportunity to speak in a round. And then anyone who hasn't spoken gets to speak, and you don't get to make a second remark until that round is complete. And the one main exception to that is if you're invoked directly by another member, you usually have the opportunity to respond to that invocation. In addition to that, motions are used to introduce all normal business or discussion, and then deliberation follows, which is a little bit in contrast to how casually run meetings happen, where items are discussed first and then made into a motion. So it's the motion first, then the discussion. And then in addition to that, motions must always be dealt with until they are resolved, either by reaching a decision or by using another motion to postpone or end that motion. So that's how Robert's Rules maintains that one item of business at a time, by only allowing things to go through motions and by always resolving the one active motion before moving on to the next. So in the informal way, the motion part's the same, but in terms of speaking, there's a permission to obtain the floor without direct acknowledgement from the chair, just so long as there isn't a conflict of multiple people speaking at once. And then there can also be direct exchanges between members, which I think is very reasonable. And there's we can have a general adherence to allowing others to speak before speaking a second time, but I don't think that needs to be a hard and fast rule about having strict rounds where you cannot speak again until everyone has spoken, so long as everyone is intentionally respectful about allowing others to speak. And these are parts that we can, I think, discuss more freely following the presentation, but these are the main points outlined both within Robert's Rules, simplified and applied, and that I thought were worth bringing up as points of discussion. And then Lastly, or no, second to lastly, there is no limit to rounds, or there would not be a general limit to rounds of remarks, since we're a small enough body and can discuss things to the length to which we feel is necessary. And then also the chair will essentially just intervene when more order is required. And a few basic examples of that are when there's multiple people trying to speak at once, or when there's a disproportionate number or time or number of remarks made by a member. And then lastly, if there's escalating or a wandering progression, then the chair can bring the direction back to order. And really quickly, those are the two options compared side by side, where you can just see kind of where things must be done and where things can optionally be done. But just a summary to highlight the comparison of the two modes. With that, that's a bit of that's really the end of the introductory type items. And then we go into section 3, which is the essentials, the nuts and bolts part. And so the main motion, which is one that we're already generally pretty familiar with, but with a little bit more detail, as specified by Robert's rules. The phrasing is important to make sure that it contains all of the pertinent information, like who, what, when, where, and also wording it in the positive, because anything worded in the negative just leads to confusion. So an example is that I move that the CAC host a table at this year's whatever fest on July 19, 20, whatever. So you can see who's doing it, what it is, where it is, and when it is. Instead of just saying, let's host a thing at this event. So this adds all the necessary clarity. When presenting motions, you have to first acquire the floor, then state the motion, and see if there is a second. So if we're doing it informally, you can acquire the floor just naturally by bringing it up. And you always say, I move that, or I move to. So it's sometimes heard that people say I motion, but it's I move, since it's a verb conjugated in first person, if you're moving something. You have to wait for someone to second. If it doesn't second, if it doesn't get a second, it doesn't get discussed. But if there is a second, then it becomes the pending motion. And then it needs to be resolved before you can move on to different business. And once it is seconded, there is always, for a main motion, the opportunity for discussion or debate. And the member who made the motion gets to speak first during that discussion. And then the rest of the discussion is just like we mentioned in section 2, depends on how it's informally or formally applied, but deliberated or facilitated by the chair, and then it goes from there. A little bit more on the main motion. After the discussion takes place, we go to voting, something we're all familiar with and just finished doing. Votes can be taken a variety of ways, and the only one or the two that are of note is that a roll call vote is required for virtual meetings per state law presently. And then the other is the unanimous consent method is used for non-controversial items, like what we do when approving the agenda and the minutes. And it's essentially by when you say, is there any objection to, and no one objects. But if there is ever an objection, that means we just go from that type of vote to one of the formal types of votes. So your objection doesn't necessarily prevent the thing from happening. It just means we're not going to do it by unanimous consent. We're going to do a different type of vote where everyone's vote has to be heard. Then the last thing that happens is the statement of conclusion, or it's, as Robert Rules calls it, completing the action, where the officer announces the result of the vote and states what's going to take place, just so everybody is clear on what happened and what needs to be done. So like I mentioned before, this is a good way to, or this is the proper way to introduce new business. So instead of talking about a thing and just saying, okay, I move that, what you would actually do is start the thing by saying, I move that we. So in the case, if I take the example of what we just experienced, I would actually begin by saying, I move that we elect a new secretary. And then if there's a second, we take up the opportunity for discussion, and then we discuss whether we do it or not, rather than discussing the thing and then finishing the discussion and saying, I move that. We would essentially take the original motion, discuss it, and then if we take it as it is, we vote on it. And if we collectively don't like what it is, we can amend it. And that we'll get to in just a moment. with a few more of the details of the other types of motions. But that's how business would be introduced. And then with seconding, similarly, you don't have to agree with the motion to second it. It just means you want it to be taken up for discussion. So if you don't agree with the motion, but you want to talk about it, do second it, because if it's not seconded, it won't be discussed. Something to keep in mind. And then lastly, a term that will come up a little bit later is the question. And that just means the result of the motion. So the motion is essentially, I think that we should do this. And then the question is essentially, do you agree? That's what you vote on at the end when you say yes or no. You are saying, do I want to uphold this thing or not? So there are future motions that refer to the question. It's useful to know that going forward. And so this isn't intuitively a motion, but a resolution is essentially a main motion. And it is just one that is made either to because of the length, complexity, or importance of a particular motion. So it's just a written, formalized motion. So voting on it essentially does the same thing as if you were to just verbally say, I move that. The only other difference that it might have from a regular main motion is that it can have a preamble, which is the whereas clauses. So I grabbed this example from a resolution, our last resolution in 2021 to adopt the bylaws. And you can see it just has a whereas to give some of the context, and then the now therefore. So the last block of essential elements is the secondary motions. So we talked about the main motion. That's where you talk about a thing that you want to do, and then we collectively talk about if we agree, and then all vote on it. And these motions are, as the purpose describes, to help the assembly decide what to do with the main motion or how to get things done in the meeting. So it's considered a preempt to the existing motion, and it becomes the immediately pending motion instead of just the pending motion. So the main motion is still pending, but if you propose a secondary motion, that becomes the immediately pending motion, and that's what gets taken up and needs to be resolved before proceeding. And they're always just taken up in the order that they're received. So if you keep on having preempting motions, you just keep on addressing the current motion, and then you work your way backwards through all of those motions in the order that they were received. Just for organizational purposes, yes, I hear audio. Did someone have a remark?
Yeah, that would be when we make amendments, correct?
Yes, exactly. So we'll have in the next couple of slides details on exactly all of the types of secondary motions, or I guess the names of them. And then those are a type of, so the first group or the first class is subsidiary motions, which are used for the process of disposing of a main motion. Disposing just meaning coming to a conclusion on. So amending is one of these subsidiary motions. There are also privileged motions, which apply to the meeting itself and not the main motion. So you'll see again in just a moment examples of that type of motion. And then the last type is incidental motions, and those are all related to procedure. I don't know why the category names have nothing to do with what the motions actually apply to, which is why I put them all in brackets with what their actual practical categories are. And then the last thing, which is a little bit detailed for this discussion, but important to know in general, is that each motion has its own set of characteristics. So a motion, among all of these types of secondary motions, they can be, some are debatable or not, some can be amended, some cannot, some require only a majority vote, others do not. And there's a table that defines what all of these are. And I did send out the presentation, and there's a link in the bottom right corner of this slide if you want to reference that table, which I won't jump to now because that will break the, well, break the flow of the presentation. So those secondary motions, if we go with the first category, that is subsidiary. So these are things that apply directly to the main motion. You can, and they're generally self-explanatory. I hate to just read knowing that you can all read, but laying on the table, which means, we're not going to deal with this right now. We want to deal with something else instead, but we'll get back to it. Previous question, that's the question that I mentioned earlier. It means let's get to the question. Do we agree on this or not? Let's stop debate. Let's vote. It's just kind of antiquated way of putting it. Previous question. Limit or extend limits of debate. That one's clear. Postpone to a certain time. Let's say it doesn't have to be even like an hourly time so much as another meeting. Let's take this up in the March meeting. So that would get postponed to the March meeting, and then it would fall in the March agenda as a postponed item. Referring to a committee is clear. Amending, I think, is clear. And then postpone indefinitely is where we don't want to talk about this. We don't want to vote on this anymore. We're just going to let the motion go. So the next category of motions is privileged, which are meeting related motions. So again, not about the main motion, not about what we're talking about, but just about the meeting itself. So fixing the time of which to adjourn. Oh my goodness, I am just taking note of the time, which has cruised by, and I'm realizing that we are within 2 minutes of the scheduled end time of our regular meeting, which I see we have no members of the public present, but still have, I think, one more slide remaining of just the presentation. We can opt to extend if anyone is willing to offer a motion, or plow through the remaining 2 slides into 1 more minute. Any thoughts?
I move that we extend.
I cannot extend tonight, sorry.
There is a motion to extend. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second to extend the meeting. Good example of specificity. Is there a time to which to extend in this motion?
Well, we could extend for next month, but let's just extend it today for another no more than 15 minutes.
All right. So the motion is to extend the present meeting for 15 minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, can we take a roll call vote?
Ryan Conway,
Yes.
Ronnie Cox, no. Lily Kleinlein,
Yes.
Andrew Manley,
Yes.
Paul White,
Yes.
Joe Winnia,
Yes.
Adelaide Petrovia,
Yes.
Nelson Schaefer.
Yes,
Okay, that's, what is it, 8-1? 7-1, sorry.
All right, so that motion is upheld. We will extend the meeting 15 minutes, and thank you all for that. I apologize for the poor time management, Rondi. I will connect with you on these things later if you are interested.
It's okay, yeah, I've just got a pack. All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Rondi.
Bye.
All right. So picking back up with the previous pending item, which is the, I think, second to last set of secondary motions. So the middle group is the privileged motions. So when we just went through fixing the time to which to adjourn, just adjourning, having a recess, which is taking a break, or raising a question of privilege. So this one would be a good example, I think, is if there's, in the case of a Zoom meeting, audio or video disturbances, or in the case of weather, if it's a hot room and we need to open a window because you feel like you're about to pass out, you can raise a question of privilege. And then the last one is calling for the orders of the day, which just means sticking to the agenda. If we're in the weeds talking about something that's unrelated and wasn't proposed, and you would like to get back to the order of business, you can call for the orders of the day. So the last category of motions are incidental or procedural motions, and these are all related to the procedure of the meeting. So point of order, if something is happening that breaches the rules of order, You can appeal if you disagree with the chairs. Division of the assembly, again, kind of an antiquated way to put it, but it just means if you're taking a voice vote and you're not sure that, or you want to hear more specifically what the results of the vote are, you can call for a division to actually count the votes instead of just doing it by voice. A very valuable one that I think will be used regularly and good to know is requests and inquiries. So again, an opportunity to interrupt to make a point of information or a point of parliamentary inquiry where you can ask about anything that you need to know that's relevant to the pending motion. So that's a good way to interject to ask your question. It's possible to suspend the rules. If, for instance, we wanted to do elections differently, we could say, I move to suspend the rules and do elections this way. And then division of the question is if there's a motion that has multiple items to it, like let's say the motion is to do thing A and thing B, and you want to do one and not the other, you wouldn't want to vote on them in the same motion. So you would request a division of the question. So you could vote yes on one and no on the other. And then the last one is objection to consideration of a question. So if you think it's something that the body should not be deliberating on, or it's not an allowable motion to be made, you can object to even considering it. So in the interest of time, I will just note that there are general exercises that we might be able to take up in a future meeting that would just basically be a walkthrough of these types of motions and how to use them just to reinforce the information, but it was already a lot of information and I want to make sure that there are opportunities for questions as well. So I'm going to jump through the exercises for now and to the recommendations, which I think will be, I thought were really good resources and fortunately both available printed and online. And that is the one that I use the most is Robert's Rules of Order Simplified and Applied, because it's not just the brute raw bunch of rules so much as a sort of table of contents style structured organization of Robert's rules, so that if you want to just look at motions or debate or specific types of motions, it's all instructionally organized and available by PDF online or at the Monroe County Public Library. So that's good for a hard written reference if you have questions. Obviously, Robert's Rules itself, the latest version, is the definitive reference. So I've included that as well. All the links are live, so you can reference them through this slide if you want to. And then lastly, I included municipal meetings because I've also found those to be very effective. They're kind of like watching a volleyball match where you can get an idea of the rhythm of how it goes. And eventually you can almost anticipate who's going to say what when because of that structure and rhythm and organization. So with that, I'll open it up to questions since we have about 10 minutes remaining and just cruise through a lot of information in a lot more time than I anticipated.
No question, but I'd like to thank you for organizing this presentation for us, Joe.
Absolutely. I appreciate your interest.
I'll second.
So I know we've talked, or we've mentioned at the last month's meeting about the potential for revisiting these on a sort of as needed basis. I hope that covered a foundational enough amount of information to at least be familiar with what some terms are, where you can find more about them, and hopefully develop a little bit of comfort around using them and how they work. And then if anyone has interest in revisiting those or practicing those in the future, we can visit those then.
I want
Okay.
to thank Lily for her exuberance in wanting so much to be secretary again.
You're welcome. I wouldn't go that far, but yep, happy to do it. I know
Joe?
John did a good job for a long time.
Yes, Ryan.
Would you share this slide deck with us?
Yes, so I can send out another email in this month's meeting notice. There was a link to the live version and then also a PDF attached. Do you recall receiving that message?
I must have missed them. My bad. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's all right. Do let me know if you're unable to locate it. If for any reason it didn't get delivered, I will gladly send those to you again, and I will probably put it in the Dropbox as well. Would be a smart idea under the resources folder. And that way you can just live there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, any other questions on that information? All right, seeing none, I have to shuffle everything back a moment to our agenda, which has as the third order of business 2022 objective planning, which I'm afraid we are going to have to take up at the March meeting. And that will bring us to public comment, which I see no one is still present for. And finally, the good of the order. If anyone would like to make a comment or observation about the organization. Yes, Tom.
You're muted, Tom.
You guys can't read my lips.
I was trying very hard, but I'm afraid no.
I just wanted to reference back to some previous discussions that have been had about scheduling a joint board and CAC meeting. I think board members have expressed a willingness and an interest to do that as well. For the board's purposes, it seems to work well for them to try to piggyback those onto the regularly scheduled board meetings since they're already committed to that time frame. So if that's something that CAC is still interested in pursuing, we want to look at doing that in time frame of the April or May board meetings. We can certainly bring that to the board's attention at their March meeting and try to get that on the calendar.
Thank you, Tom. I will quick note on that. I did send out a scheduling poll. I did receive responses from Morning, Lily, and Adelaide on availability, and I was going to relay that to the executive committee following this meeting.
Okay.
And if anyone else has the opportunity to complete the poll, I will delay a few minutes to include those responses. Any other remarks there or comments for the good of the order? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and I'll make a reminder that our next meeting is on Thursday, March 17 at 5:15 p.m. either in the Nat U Hill room in the courthouse or virtually, depending on executive orders. And then that brings us to adjourning. If there is no objection, this meeting will adjourn. And seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Have a good night.